Well, the NFL isn't the only one running into issues. I mean, the MLB, they're working on trying to get back right now. In fact, on Sunday, they had the teams release 60-man rosters. At least most teams released the full 60-man roster. Baltimore, I believe, only released 44. But there were some interesting notes for some of these teams. I mean, most notably, the Rays were the first ones out, and they put a pretty notable prospect of Water Franco, uh, the 19-year-old shortstop. He's making the cut. He's coming up from single A ball from last year and is going to try to make an impact at the higher level.
Yeah, a lot of people are high on him this year. They thought he might make it up in a 162 game season, and now with these expanded rosters, maybe he does make his way onto a major league roster. The Rays won 100 games last year, so they're a pretty good team. Now, they're built a little bit more like how the A's build their team versus, like, say, the Yankees. And it will be interesting how these divisions play into it. But if the Rays are a playoff team and they think he can uh, be a bat and a fielder that could be an impact player in the postseason, absolutely call him up. Why not?
Well, I think giving your prospects a chance in these shortened seasons is a very smart move, to be honest. I mean, 60 games is a lot more like the length of a college season than it is an MLB season. So you're going to have these young guys that if they can get out and have that strong start like you see a lot of the younger baseball players have nowadays, there isn't the dog days of August or the just boiling heat of the summer where everyone's already played 80 games or something and they're getting tired and they're just not focusing. This is a short window. I think it's going to benefit the youth. I think it's going to benefit those younger guys being able to just get out on a hot start and keep their streaks going potentially. And I think it allows some of these teams to take a risk in a smaller sample size and let these kids see what the big leagues are like.
Yeah, I mean, devil's advocate, they could start out cold and never get a chance to heat up. But
That is obviously the other side of the coin, yes.
uh but like, I think I mentioned a guy to you during our pregame or our pregame, our pre-show rundown. Uh Bobby Witt, who's going to be on the Royal 60 man whatever. But like I expect him to kind of just chill at the minor league station or wherever the minor league team's capped with the extra 20 people and play in those simulated games or whatever and be around his professional coaching. But, uh, I don't really expect to see Bobby Witt on the non competitive Royals. Like, that doesn't really make sense. But with the Rays and Franco, like a team that I'm not going to put them in my favorites to be competing for a title this year, but realistically could be in that hunt. It makes a lot of sense. You always go for a title when you can get it, whether it's 60 games or 162. You're playing to win.
I think the Rays have to be in the conversation for a playoff spot, whether it is the AL East spot or it's a wild card spot. I think the Rays are going to be one of the favorites in the AL East to find one of those spots. I'm interested to see how these division specific schedules are going to look, though, because it allows for great disparity. I mean, there's obviously difference in competition in some of these conference or some of these divisions, and I'm very curious to see how the weaker divisions will play out, how some of the stronger divisions will play out, and what impacts those can have on maybe taking futures, maybe just the day-to-day betting once baseball starts back up. But I have a feeling that there could be a few unexpected surprises making it into the playoffs because of this weird scheduling format that doesn't see everyone playing each other, but really you're just staying within your own division and then the league's equivalent of your own division.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the East, which encompasses both the AL and NL East, that's why it's the East. Um, I think that's probably the toughest, no questions asked. You have the Yankees, you have the Braves, you have the Mets, you have the World Series champ Nationals, you have the Phillies who improved this year, actually added some Yankees and Mets. So those teams are really good. The Blue Jays are very young, so maybe you handicap them very talented. The Rays, like we mentioned already, won 100 games last year. The Red Sox still have Devers and Bogarts and JD Martinez and Benedetti. So sure, no Chris Sale, no Mookie Betts, but they got Verdugo back. So the Red Sox are still plenty talented. And then that really only leaves the Marlins, who improved a little bit this offseason. They're still a step below the other four teams in the NL East.
They might have
And
a rough season.
yeah,
They might have
and
a rough 60 games.
and the Baltimore Orioles, who are definitely in for a rough 60 games. But
Yes.
um, to your point, I think I would handicap teams in the NL Central. I'd probably give them all a little boost, like the Cubs and Brewers, because they get to play against the AL Central, and that's the Royals, that's the Tigers. Now it's also the Cleveland Indians, who are pretty good right now. The Minnesota Twins could be pretty good again. So we'll see what happens, but definitely getting the Royals and the Tigers in there is an advantage for the Cubs, for the Brewers.
I think that Central will be a very interesting spot, and we could see some surprises come out of it. I mean, with 60 games, each game has so much more significance than in the 162. Every win means just that much more in a sense because there's just that much less time to make up for it in the span of the season. So having a few more of those easy series, whether it's playing in the Central and playing against some of those teams that you just mentioned, or having a very competitive East or the West, which is kind of all over the place. That could be a wild card in itself on how sparingly different and wide in talent those West teams are and how they can shape up for a 60 game season. I think that there's a lot to mull over and consider with the way that these are scheduled if you're going to look at futures for the MLB playoffs of who's going to make it. I think there's going to be some surprise teams that make it through, whether it's going to be one wild card team, whether it's going to be a wild card team in the NL and the AL. Who knows? I'm not sure. I think it's going to be interesting. I also think whatever NL team does the best at integrating a universal DH the quickest will have a tremendous advantage over their counterparts because that is going to be something rather new for these NL teams, the universal designated hitter.
Yeah, it's probably why you should redraft your fantasy leagues. Someone on this podcast. But, uh, you know, I think the universal DH teams are going to figure it out. Like, the Mets are gonna all of a sudden have a spot for Cespedes, right? Or Dominic Smith. Two players that we weren't sure what we were gonna see of them this year because of roster spots. I'm sure Starling Castro plays a little more for the Nationals now. So like teams will figure it out. They may not all look like the American League DH, the lefty power bat, but these NL teams will get good quality at bats in there. One thing that's interesting, speaking of the DH to me, Aristides Aquino, it was pointed out to me from my day job. My guy Craig Mish and Joe Pisapia, they pointed it out for me, and it was really important information, I thought, so I'm going to share it with our listeners. Aristides Aquino was put in the minor league camp for the Reds. And this is interesting because we're playing a 60 game season, which is
And he
pretty
caught
much,
fire last year.
yeah, and he pretty much only played 60 games. He played 56 games and he hit 19 home runs. Like, you'd think that's a bat. Maybe
He
he's not
took
the
over
greatest.
Sports Center last
Yeah.
summer. I mean, he was amazing. He was hitting, I think he had 11 home runs in like the span of like 2 to 3 weeks or something insane. He was on an incredible roll as soon as he got called up showing power that no one really expected from a player at that position because I believe he's a shortstop.
No,
Is he an outfielder?
yeah, but
Okay.
he no one expected it because he was not a highly thought of prospect. Like
Ah.
he came out of nowhere.
It's a very interesting move when you see teams like the Tampa Bay Rays who are taking chances on a 19-year-old prospect and giving him a spot, but yet a prospect last year that I would say proved himself of Aquino is getting sent to the minors camp. Now that doesn't necessarily mean he won't be on the majors roster come the 60 game season, but it's not a good sign.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting, and like you said, he hit 19 home runs in 56 games. Like that could realistically lead the league this year.
So, what are some things that you're going to be considering and looking at over this next month as we prepare for the MLB to start again? Are you going to be looking at futures, or are you going to be trying to look at what teams are best to hit the ground running for your day of picks?
My favorite bet is Yankee overs. Now, opening day, I will not be touching that. If it's Scherzer versus Cole, I'll come back day two. Actually, well, that could be Corbin, or it could be Strasburg. So maybe I just sit that series out. But uh, the Yankees overs is something I always like, and now with a healthy Judge and Stanton, yes, please. But I think the most important thing to do when handicapping everything is to evaluate bullpens, because bullpens are going to be really who's pitching this year. I mean, yeah, you'll have a Scherzer, you'll have a Garrett Cole, you'll have a Zach Greinke, a Kershaw, right? But outside of the top guys, I think you're going to see a mishmash of pitchers throughout the season.
The Washington Nationals included 36 pitchers in their 60 player pool. So the Nationals understand what pitching is going to mean for this. I was looking at this. You talked about MLB fantasy drafts a little bit earlier. Wink, wink, nudge, nudging me. I had a draft. Yes, that did already happen. I had an MLB draft, and it was up in the air with the coronavirus. So my thought was take as many aces as I could because if there was a shortened season, I didn't know if it would mean that there would still be a full 5 man rotation or if there would be a bigger workload for the aces, maybe a little bit or what have you. So I took Bueller, I took Kershaw, I took Strasburg, I took Scherzer. I took all the aces that you know are going to come out and perform well. So I think looking at it like that, looking at the pitchers, there is going to be a lot of bullpen action and bullpen movement, but I don't know how much the rotations are going to get affected.